The Book of Enoch, chapter 1. The words of the blessings of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. And he took up his parable, and said, Enoch, a righteous man, whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the angels showed me, and from them I heard everything, and from them I understood as I saw, but not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is for to come. Concerning the elect I said, and took up my parable concerning them, but not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is to come in the last days. And in the last days, God says, I shall pour out my Spirit upon every sort of flesh, and I will give signs in heaven above, and signs on earth below, blood and fire and smoke, mist. The sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great day of the Lord arrives. Acts chapter 2, verses 16 to 20. In this case, the last days preceded the great day of the Lord, which day apparently brought the last days to their conclusion. See the book of Zephaniah chapter 1 verses 14 to 18, the book of Malachi chapter 4 and verse 5, the book of Matthew, or the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11 and verses 13 and 14. Since Peter addressed the natural Jews and the Jewish converts, his words must have had particular reference to them, and evidently indicated that they were living in the last days of the then existing Jewish system of things, with its centre of worship at Jerusalem. Therefore, the generation to come that Enoch alludes to in verse 3 above is the generation from 200 BC to 135 AD. You will remember that God said to Abraham that after 400 years he would deliver Israel in the fourth generation. A generation in the Bible is normally 40 years long. However, here a generation is 100 years. 4 times 100 equals 400 years. The Book of Enoch is not a record of the pre-flood history of the world. It is an apocalyptic record about the last days of the Jewish people. The writers of the apocalyptic books, or the apocalyptic literature, glances at the contemporary history of the world around them, to which many a cryptic reference is made. However, these references are only made with a view to comforting the oppressed and afflicted, with the thought that even the mightiest of earthly powers are shortly to be overthrown by the advent of the new and glorious age, so that every reference to the present is merely a position taken up from which to point to the future. The Book of Enoch should first be understood as history in allegory, which is the nature of apocalyptic literature, and second, it can be understood as a prophecy pointing forward to the end times. Therefore we can read again, but not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is for to come in the last days. The generation to come that Enoch alludes to in verse 3 above is this generation, our generation. The generation that will see the climax of all the dreams, visions, insights and experiences and wisdom given to Enoch by God concerning the last generation come to pass. And he took up his parable and said, Concerning the elect I said, and took up my parable concerning them. So what does parable mean? Parable means a simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson. In English, the word parable can also mean a proverb. A proverb embodies a truth in expressive language, often metaphorically, and a parable is a comparison or a similitude, a short, usually fictitious story from which a moral or spiritual truth is drawn. The Book of Enoch should be understood in the same way we would understand the Book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 1 and verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to him to show to his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John. Signified it, that is, revealed it by many signs and symbols which he deems to be comprehensible and enlightening to the bound servants, as to scribes instructed unto the kingdom of heaven, Matthew chapter 13 and verse 52, who bring out of their treasures the scriptures, things new and old. Another rendering of Revelation chapter 1 and verse 1 is a revelation by Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his slaves the things that must shortly take place, and he sent his angel and presented it in signs through him to his slave John. That is, he indicated them by sign, presented them in signs. It was not sent in plain form, but in an enigma or sign form. To signify is to represent by sign or symbol. That is what is meant by the use of the verb signify. In this case is shown conclusively by what John saw and heard. He saw certain things which he describes, and concerning these he is repeatedly informed that the mystery or meaning of what he saw was this and that. The same method of imparting knowledge was delivered to the prophets. See the Book of Hosea, chapter 12 and verse 10. Thus, the Book of Enoch is an allegory or parable about the events leading up to the Maccabean revolt until the time of King Herod the Great. When it comes to the account of the fallen angels, we should not understand this literally, but as an allegory of corruption within the Jewish priesthood. The priests who, similar to the sons of God in the book of Genesis chapter 6, violated the boundaries of the cultural purity by marrying non-Israelite women or non-Jewish women. Therefore, the language about the fallen watchers and the angels approaching God indicates that some of the angels are understood to be priests. In Enoch chapter 10 and verse 11, in which God accuses the watchers of defiling themselves with women in their uncleanness, should be understood as marrying non-Jewish women. The fallen angels who commit fornication should be understood as criticism against the Jerusalem priesthood.